So let me begin with a little bit about the security series. This is our 8th event. This is our 4th year here in Washington, D.C. Our first was focused on CDM and the DHS initiative there. We've also been to New York, Houston, and for the last couple of years, we've been in Silicon Valley with a May event. And each time we do our best to make the day topical and relevant for the local community. In New York, the focus was DDoS and resiliency in the financial system. In Houston, it was in energy. And this last May, we took a little bit of a different take. We tried to look at technology and policy that done right can be a real fuel for digital transformation and growth, and done wrong can actually be an inhibitor to the same. So a little bit about the Chertoff Group for those of you who don't know us. We're an advisory and investment banking firm, and we're focused solely on security and risk management. And we apply our insights into technology, threat, and policy to help our clients 3 ways: to improve their resiliency to risk, to build competitive advantage, and to accelerate their growth. Now, a little bit looking forward for today, let me try to go forward, is in taking a look at the election. This election was similar to many others in at least one big reason: an intense focus on the economy. So that's going to be the jump-off point for the focus for today, is where does security and how does security impact growth? And specifically to address this important question, which is how do we grow and create jobs securely while at the same time protecting privacy and protecting public safety and individual privacy? Now, to me, this is a kind of a big question, and it gets a little bit easier to answer through the lens of something that I call the 3 T's of the digital economy. And this is technology, threat, and trust. Now, why is that? These are 3 big interrelated ideas that together have, I think, a pretty profound impact on strategy, on policy, and on public opinion. Now, for starters, I'd encourage everybody to at least be aware of the 3 T's, but actually do more. I'd actually ask you to think about how you can leverage the first T, and that's technology, react to the second T, and that's threat, and shape or mold the third T, and that's trust. Now, it could be because I've lived in Silicon Valley since the late 80s, and I've got sort of that left coast biased view of the world, but to me it seems pretty darn clear that we are living in the golden age of innovation. There's really been nothing like it. And if you step back and look at the profound impact of these technology disruptions that in no particular order, but mobile, cloud, big data, social media, and of course IoT, every leader, every organization, I think, needs to step back and assess how we interact with customers and stakeholders, how we deliver goods and services. And in many cases, it's a bigger question. It's do we even have a valid business model anymore? You know, you got to ask yourself, would you want to be Blockbuster or Netflix? That guy a couple years ago who was real proud that he had cornered up all the New York City taxi medallions, or an early investor in Uber? So you can see that the winners are going to be those that think about and can leverage that first T, technology, to build better products, lower the costs of those products, and actually create jobs. Now, there was a report that came out, I think it was the first quarter of this year, with a fancy name, the Digital Vortex. And in it, though, was a really startling statistic. And it said that 4 out of 10 industry incumbents are going to be displaced by digital disruption over the next 5+ years. 4 out of 10. I mean, if that's anywhere close to right, that is really startling number. And I think the message is clear. This is an issue for all of us, whether you're in government or business, is to think hard about this first T, and that's technology. Now, sadly, this golden age, it has a dark side. You see, the people who have developed these tectonic shifts in technology, mobility, cloud, et cetera, they didn't think about security. In many cases, security at best was bolted on after the fact. It wasn't designed in from the beginning. And we're seeing that in the last few weeks in IoT, aren't we, with some of these DDoS storms. So what's the effect of that is it's enabled a new class of bad guys who are taking advantage of holes in these new platforms to create new risks. And these new risks are being manufactured and developed by really smart, organized people like cyber gangs and nation states. And collectively, this is this second T, and that's threat. Now, what's the impact of that? And I think that leads you directly to the third T, and that's trust. Because it seems to me that one of the natural consequences of cyber breaches is an erosion of trust. Trust that government has in citizens or business, trust that citizens have in government, trust that consumers have in business. You know, you could argue that we are living in the age of uncertainty. And this is really sad because we all know how important trust is to relationships and relationships are to growth. Now, I think there are this isn't all gloom and doom. This isn't like time for a group hug, because I think there is actually some good news here. Now, it wasn't that long ago that when you thought about cybersecurity, that was for those guys and gals down the hall, sort of those technical people down the hall. It was a technical risk. And over the past couple of years, it's sort of inched back, and now most people would say this is a business risk. And for many industries and many leaders, they now say, hey, it's number one business risk. And if you remember back to the SWIFT crisis and the SWIFT cyber threats here around April, May, this was a really timely quote that came out from chairwoman of the SEC when she said, cybersecurity is the biggest risk facing the financial system. That's a big statement. It's a very big statement, and it's a far cry from where we were in recognition just a few years ago. Now, in spring of this year, Cisco introduced, I thought, a really interesting study, trying to poke at this issue. Is security a technical risk? How do you think about it? Is it a business risk? Is it something that you think can drive your business? So they interviewed 1,000 people, and it was line of business executives and CFOs. So it was an interesting population in the study. And what came out of that was 44% said, you know what? Cybersecurity is actually a source of competitive advantage. And 1/3 said they viewed it primarily as a source of competitive differentiation. And I thought that was actually pretty darn encouraging. So what I sort of think about that and say, you know, you can be in Michigan or you can be in Menlo Park or points in between. But that a real thorough understanding and application of the 3 T's is going to position your organization for growth, secure growth. So let's take a look at the agenda. Let's take a look at the agenda today. So we're going to start with a keynote from Secretary Chertoff and my good friend and colleague, Katie Montgomery, who's going to sort of tee up some of the bigger issues for the day. Then we've got 2 panels in the morning. The first is going to take the big picture and talk about what are some of the more important cybersecurity priorities, and with some insights and opinions, offer some suggestions for the incoming administration to consider. Then the second panel is going to look at a very important issue of identity. Trusted identity is a foundation for internet commerce and communications more broadly. There's a lot of innovation and a lot of things to consider in that area. Then we're going to break for lunch, and I'm sure everybody's done this birds of a feather concept, so take a look through the pamphlets there and figure out where and who you want to network with most, and we found that people get more out of lunch with that type of program. Then when we come back, we're going to start with something we call a spotlight, and this is the idea to bring some fresh thinking, a new way of looking at a topic, and we're happy to have the CIO of the FCC, David Bray, who's got a really cool talk about just that, thinking outside the box. Then the afternoon shifts to, that's sort of our senior management and board level focus in the afternoon. So the first panel is one that I'm very passionate about and talk about frequently, and it's security in the boardroom. And so we've got a good mix of people who can lend perspective on how to create a more compelling conversation that all parties get it and actually understand each other, with the net effect being, how do we come away with better risk controls and governance models? Then the final panel, we're going to look at something which could be new to some of you, but is a really important issue to understand, and it's cyber insurance. Now, this is a relatively small market today. Some say a little over $3 billion, but some of those same statistics say that it's going to grow to over $25 billion by the year 2025. Now, that's a CAGR. So why is that? and what are the issues driving that. And I think as you think through that panel, you're going to see it's directly related to this security in the boardroom conversation. It's about risk transfer. Okay? So as a next step, I truly want to thank our sponsors. I know everybody says this in the opening, but it's true. It's not possible without you guys. So we really appreciate the support from Coalfire, Cisco, Microsoft, SailPoint, and of course, Landesk. And then we have a couple of event partners, the Cypher Brief and Passcode, and thanks to you guys as well.